The battle began, but the disparity became clear immediately. Jahal was too strong. It was to be expected. Jahal's existence value reached hundreds of millions. While victory wasn't determined by numbers alone, overturning that difference was extremely difficult. Ultima and Carrera launched an attack utilizing their newly acquired agility. Ultima unleashed a piercing strike against Jahal. Her poisonous claws were vicious, but sadly, they were deflected by his exoskeleton. Carrera fired her golden gun and slashed with her sword. Even her rare combat sense was futile before his absolute defense. The law manipulation possessed by Luminous was a threat to Jahal. However, Jahal transformed his own arms into tentacles and smoothly parried the sword strikes. If even Luminous's law manipulation didn't work, Xian's swordplay was in a similar boat. Not a single attack was working properly. That was only natural, as Jahal was also using his newly gained authority to unleash countermeasures. Ultimate skill Evil Dragon Lord Azidahaka is it? It's quite usable. Unlike Vega, who relied on instinct, Jahal grasped his authority rationally. Moreover, with the current Infinite Eater, which had even incorporated Solanus' Devastator virus, he was now able to clash head-on with Nihility and hold his own. In terms of absolute energy quantity, Jahal was superior. At this point, it was a math problem. Even if he was slightly less efficient, Jahal would win in the end. If Ultima and Carrera hadn't obtained Rimuru's slime cells, their fate would have been sealed in just this exchange. They were lucky just to still be in the fight. That was the situation. Luminous and the others, being seasoned veterans, could not fail to realize that a long battle was disadvantageous. You lot, how is it? Do you have any plans? I'll take him down with spirit. Xian Dono's opinion isn't realistic, is it? To be honest, I don't feel like I can beat him even if I slam him with my strongest secret technique. If it's judgment, Carrera thought, but it was unclear when it would be reusable. She would know intuitively if she could use it, but since time was stopped, she couldn't gauge if the necessary karma had accumulated for reuse. The stopped world was the optimal counter to the one-shot per day restriction, a weakness known only to those who could wield it. Also, regarding the secret technique, Single Flash, it was too early to release it. She needed to see through the enemy's characteristics and gain the conviction that she could definitely finish him off. Carrera wasn't a reckless idiot. She could judge success or failure with her innate senses. That was why she only looked like she was enjoying the fight with wild abandon. She needed something to assure her of victory. If she unleashed Single Flash here, it would certainly deal massive damage. However, as a result, Carrera would be rendered immobile. On top of that, the credit would go to someone else. That's not very fun, is it? That was Carrera's honest feeling. No matter how reckless Carrera was, she had no intention of gambling against the current Jahal. If there were allies who could coordinate, she shouldn't use her trump card yet. That was Carrera's judgment. Conversely, if there were no allies, if there were no other way, Carrera would have unleashed Single Flash without hesitation. That duality was also part of Carrera's nature. Therefore, the one who was truly a muscle-brained reckless fool was Xian. Without thinking about the consequences, Xian challenged Jahal. Recklessly, frantically, always giving it her all. Glancing at Xian, Carrera, Ultima, and Luminous held a strategy meeting. If I shave off a huge chunk of his stamina, can I entrust the rest to you guys? Absolutely not. If you die, Lord Rimuru will be angry at us. Indeed. In that case, it is still too early to gamble on a decisive move. True. At the very least, as long as this stopped world isn't lifted, the means we can take are limited. In the end, no brilliant plan came to mind. Seeing their plight, Jahal let out a loud raucous guffaw. Hoo-ha-ha-ha. How pathetic, you small fry. The honest impression Jahal's voice was one that trampled all over the pride of Ultima and the others. I'll kill him. I'll torment him to death. I'll torture him to death. I'll spend tens of thousands of years making him beg for death, and then I'll kill him. We're on the same wavelength, aren't we, Ultima? I'll lend a hand when that time comes. For these hot-headed demon girls, just holding back their rage was a struggle. Even after hearing Luminous's command to calm down, they could not conceal their irritation. However, the fact that they didn't launch a suicide attack showed they had grown. Had they challenged Jahal without a viable plan to counter him, they would only have hastened their energy depletion and sealed their defeat. As proof of this, Xian was completely exhausted. Jahal had mastered the ultimate skill Evil Dragon King Azidahaka, and clad his armor, made of the ultimate metal, hurricane in his power. He covered it evenly, without any blind spots, so that it would devour offensive energy from all directions. While lightly parrying Xian's attacks, he had been absorbing her energy. Xian collapsed, gasping for breath. Luminous was moving her to safety. With the situation as it was, the remaining fighters could barely even make a move. If even the tough Xian ended up in that state, Ultima and Carrera would have their energy drained in an instant. The only thing capable of making contact was Luminous's Dharma. However, that did not mean her attacks would be effective. It was almost checkmate. They were out of moves. Well then, it seems you cheeky little girls are in need of punishment. Don't screw with me. You're the one who's a brat. Exactly. You haven't lived even 1% as long as we have, yet you act so high and mighty. Carrera and Ultima were furious. Luminous, and Yuki, who had erased his presence to avoid collateral damage, could find no words to reply to them. Though they looked like young girls, the lifespan of a primordial was as old as the cardinal world itself. Remembering, or perhaps being made to realize this, they held their tongues. And then, Jahal laughed thunderously, as if mocking them. Then come at me. If you won't, then I shall come to you. With no trace of his former obesity, Jahal moved with agility. He reached top speed instantly, moving so fast it could be mistaken for teleportation. It was a speed surpassing even a swim. Had this not been the suspended world, the shockwaves alone generated by reaching sublight speeds would have caused immense devastation. First, Jahal targeted Ultima. Ultima reacted instantly and attempted to evade, but her posture was slightly off. Aiming for that opening, he struck her with a fist clad in Void Eater. His fist pierced through both of Ultima's guarding arms. In that instant, her arms were engulfed in flames. Jahal manipulated even the hellfire of the Flame King and I at will, concentrating its heat into his Flame Eater fist. Tisk. The mass of condensed energy blew apart Ultima's arms and exploded against her chest. The unleashed explosive destructive power sent Ultima's petite body flying into the air before slamming her into the ground. Carrera, who had stepped in to cover Ultima, was also instantly beaten down. Wow. By the time she registered her shock, a massive amount of energy had already been drained from her body. It was the effect of the Devastator virus. Jahal's left arm had transformed into tentacles, creeping along the ground to attack Carrera. The swarm of tentacles thrashed wildly, coiling around Carrera like snakes as they sought to devour her. Their aim was also directed at his other prey, Ultima. The tentacles entwined around her, sealing Ultima's movements. Carrera was in a similar state of restraint. To remain conscious but unable to move was humiliating for the two of them. However, forcing their bodies to move would only result in their energy being devoured more violently. It was wiser to stay still and wait for help. Sensing this, Luminous began slicing through the tentacles with her Dharma, but, as if to say, "You're in the way," Jahal's strong arm sent Luminous flying. Kohahaha. Weak, 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 you are so weak. I am invincible. I never imagined I would obtain such power, but as I am now, I cannot possibly lose to anyone. Jahal's loud laughter echoed across the battlefield. The confidence that he could slaughter even a god swirled within Jahal. Jahal was drunk on his newfound power, believing that achieving god slaying was no longer a mere dream. It seemed as though the outcome was decided, but you were being noisy. Truly, how unpleasant. Black and white had arrived. The battle was only just beginning. It was Diablo who stepped forward. Are you perhaps intending to fight alone? Naturally. I acknowledge your ability, but to be honest, you would be in the way. So, I'll leave those two to you. Leaving those words behind, Diablo walked toward Jahal. His posture was natural, lacking any tension, as if he were merely taking a stroll. Diablo calmly assessed Jahal. The energy coming from him was tremendous, reaching several times that of Diablo at a conservative estimate. Kufufufufu, magnificent. Rimuru-sama entrusted this to me, and he must have foreseen this situation. I, myself, shall acknowledge you as a flawless opponent. Speaking honestly, Jahal was a formidable enemy. That was proven the moment even Xion failed to defeat him completely. However, Diablo had a different impression regarding Xion. Without Rimuru's slime cells and unable to wield the power of nihility, she had fought remarkably well to get that far. He was secretly impressed. That is precisely why Diablo was grateful for his own good fortune. To have obtained the opportunity to bury Jahal, whom even the first secretary could not defeat with his own hands. Through this, he could make it known that he, Diablo, was the more important one. If he could be of use to his master, Rimuru, that alone was his long-cherished desire. Being given a stage to perform like this was an unexpected joy for Diablo. This is exactly where his daily training would pay off. Diablo was happily fired up, intending to make the most of this opportunity. Besides, there was also some anxiety. Not about whether he could beat Jahal or such trivial matters. In fact, Diablo had sensed the presence of Zijin arriving as well. He was worried that if he didn't hurry, his prey might be stolen. In short, victory was the absolute prerequisite. Kufufufufu. I yielded the prey to Zijin last time, so this time, I shall dispose of this properly with my own hands. Thus, Diablo appraised Jahal. In response to this, Jahal became enraged. What is with those eyes? Do not look at me, the Sorcerer Emperor Jahal, with such arrogant eyes. Thinking him a fool who didn't know his place, Jahal worked himself into a frenzy. Before absolute power violence, petty tricks are meaningless. Poor skill levels stand no chance against the mainstream of irrational power. Specifically speaking, it is logical that a human body cannot push back a massive meteorite. Jahal's power could not be parried by cheap tricks. Die. Cladding his mighty arm in hellfire, Jahal struck at Diablo. He unleashed a simple yet absolute technique, Flame Void Eating Fist. It destroys, incinerates, and devours anything it touches. An invincible technique that combines offense and defense. Jahal has no connection to martial arts techniques, but since the tentacles split and swarm the enemy on their own, he doesn't need to do anything himself. This is also a story unique to the stopped world. If following the laws of physics, it would be an even more vicious technique. The heat wave burns the enemy, the explosion becomes a shockwave, trampling the weak. And if he simply absorbs the scattering energy, Jahal can win without exhaustion. It was a technique of an emperor befitting Jahal, where victory is guaranteed just by waiting. Jahahaha. Die, small fry. Regret underestimating me and repent in the afterlife. Jahal's confident attack closed in on Diablo. However, Diablo did not panic. His mouth curved into an arc, forming an evil smile. I shall instruct you all as well. Watch my fighting style closely, Diablo told Tensura and the others. Ultima and Carrere, having regained their freedom of movement, looked annoyed. However, without complaining, they obediently complied. Yuki was also spectating. Luminous, not missing this chance either, intended to watch without reserve from the special seat next to Tensura. If Diablo won, good. Even if he lost, the calculation was that she could rest in the meantime. Paying no mind to the various speculations of the spectators, Diablo concentrated on Jahal. The approaching tentacles split repeatedly and assaulted Diablo. However, they didn't even graze him. He saw through them perfectly, evading with minimal movement. Moreover, he foresaw the subsequent movements and dealt with them without a single misstep. Tisk, I guess we just have to admit it, huh? At least for now. I understand the frustration, but this is a rare opportunity. That Diablo is showing us his hand, so study it properly. Tensura admonished Ultima and Carrere, who looked displeased. She was indirectly teaching them that what came next was important. Luminous spoke. Even so, what tremendous skill. With that much power put into it, it is extremely difficult to weather it with technique alone. True to her words, Diablo was displaying an insane level of skill. While enhancing his own body to the maximum with nihility collapse, he perfectly adjusted the rate of bodily decay to balance with infinite regeneration. By not taking the violence head-on but angling himself to deal with it at maximum efficiency, he was contending magnificently. That was the pinnacle of technique. I mean, isn't that magic? No matter how you look at it, he's using it, right? Right. I thought magic use was impossible while time is stopped, but I see, if it's inside one's own body, it's separated from external laws, so wielding magic is possible. Understanding it was one thing but executing it was another story entirely. I really don't want to admit it, but that guy is amazing. I'll surpass him someday. Ultima acknowledged Diablo even while talking trash, and Carrere, for her part, set Diablo as her goal. Tensura also could not hide her surprise at Diablo. It was surprising because he was compensating for the desperate gap between himself and Jahal by utilizing even magic. Filling his whole body with nihility collapse to boost physical abilities to the maximum, then further strengthening it with magic. Only when his own skill level was added to that state did Diablo surpass Jahal. It's wonderful. A new martial art where magic and skill are fused. It seems the theory is fundamentally different from existing magic fighters. The three demoness girls were, in their own ways, captivated by Diablo's fighting style based on this new theory. It was a similar yet distinct principle. The importance lies in how power is utilized, a logic any strong individual understands. If one can generate magicals inexhaustibly like Melm or the true dragons, that's a different story. Since it is wrong to base thinking on such absurd existences, this discussion is limited to general strong individuals. Against an opponent with overwhelming energy, how far can one go with little magic power? Eliminating waste and exerting maximum effect with small energy, that is the most important thing. Diablo had perfected this at a level no ordinary person could imitate. Even if Tensura and the others tried to reproduce it, they would need several years. However, since they cleared the prerequisites, for them who live infinite lives, it was a technique they would eventually make possible. That is likely why he showed it to us, but... Tensura felt slightly irritated, feeling as though Diablo's composure had been flaunted at them. As if guiding those three demoness girls, Diablo spoke. Kufufufufu, watch closely. This is the truth obtained by observing Rimuru Sama's wisdom and analyzing the power granted by Rimuru Sama's celestial. The truth of celestial it is a combat seeker technique devised by Diablo, made possible only by housing nihility collapse within Rimuru's slime cells. By recirculating energy at the highest efficiency without regarding its size, it controls exhaustion, creating a perfectly harmonized effect. It was an excellent technique that made continuous combat eternally possible, allowing one to face any enemy. In later ages, it would come to be praised as the strongest undefeated combat seeker technique, but the prerequisites were too strict, limiting those who could handle it. It would come to be passed down to only a few of Rimuru's executives. As a side note, the prerequisite was, needless to say, the presence or absence of Rimuru's slime cells. I guess begging Rimuru-sama for them was the right move, huh? Even without them, my body condition was great, but now that I have them, I don't think I want to go back to how it was before. Ultima and Carrera whispered and nodded to each other. Setting aside Yuki, who was spectating, only Luminous was left out. I know not what you received from Rimuru, but are you boasting? I have received nothing, you know. Obviously. You're unrelated. You are impudent. My lord is a treasure belonging only to us. Truly so. We must proceed with legislation to ensure Rimuru-sama is never taken out of the gates. This statement was no joke. Going forward, the outflow of slime cells would be thoroughly prevented. Since Seal fully agreed with this, a future awaited where even Luminous would find it impossible to obtain them. And as for Diablo, having finished his instruction to the 3 demoness girls, he was finally about to get serious. Jahal was powerful, but there was no problem. I enjoyed this quite a bit. You are perfect as teaching material, but let us bring this to an end. As a token of gratitude for hurting my subordinates, I shall show you my seriousness. Declaring so, Diablo increased his magic power. Even in his current state, he surpassed Jahal, but from here, through super high-speed magical excitation, Diablo's power reached its zenith. And if it is the strongest and worst secret technique released while utilizing the truth of Celestial End of World Requiem, erasing Jahal from this world would be easy. Naming it Celestial End with this technique, Diablo intended to finish Jahal off completely. Even in the unlikely event he couldn't kill him completely, the match was as good as decided. However, because the recoil of this technique was too great, he needed to reinforce his own body to the maximum as well. Diablo absorbed surrounding elementary particles and instantaneously performed body reinforcement. He was reconstructing a tough body capable of withstanding advanced energy application by taking in surrounding matter. And, just as preparations were nearing completion, Kayaha. An innocent laughter accompanied by a chill rang out across the battlefield. Tisk. Diablo clicked his tongue. Unexpectedly, time was up. But more than that, thinking of the intruder who would inevitably intervene, Diablo's expression clouded over. Good grief, it seems my turn ends here. And that premonition would prove to be spot on.